For years, medical coders used a single ICD-10 CM code to report multiple sclerosis. Regardless of the patient's presentation or progression, G35 was the standard. The code set now replaces this general approach with a series of distinct clinical pathways. The root code, G35, has been reclassified. When documented without further detail, it is considered an incomplete diagnostic state. This creates an immediate hurdle in electronic health records. A physician noting multiple sclerosis without specifying the progression type provides insufficient data for accurate coding. Coders must now look for specific disease patterns in clinical notes. If those details are missing, a clinical query is necessary to explain that a generic diagnosis no longer meets reporting standards. Using a standalone G35 code creates a documentation gap that fails to prove medical necessity, which can interrupt the patient's access to care. These new requirements map diagnostic codes to the physical behavior of the disease over time. The taxonomy splits into 3 primary pathways. The first branch captures relapsing-remitting disease under code G35.A. The second branch maps primary progressive disease to the G35.B series. The third branch covers secondary progressive disease within the G35.C series. These branches represent mutually exclusive trajectories of the patient's nervous system. Identifying which of these 3 structural pathways a patient is on is required for accurate reporting and treatment validation. Relapsing-remitting MS is defined by periods of symptom stability followed by sudden flare-ups. This chart tracks disease activity. During remission, symptoms completely or partially disappear, creating a flat baseline of 0 active symptoms. This stability is punctuated by sudden attacks. Returning to that baseline after a spike fits the G35.A criteria. To classify an event as a relapse, documentation must show new or worsening symptoms lasting for at least 24 hours. There must also be a defined gap between episodes. A new flare-up must occur at least 30 days after the last relapse ended. Statistics show the majority of patients are initially diagnosed with this specific clinical presentation. Assigning G35-A is not determined by the severity of the symptoms, but by the timing of their appearance and disappearance. A smaller group of patients present with primary progressive MS, which follows a different structural path. In this manifestation, there are no definable periods of remission. The disease moves in a straight line of steady neurological deterioration from the onset. This decline maps to the G35-B code series, where a 6th character identifies the current activity of the disease. The active modifier, G35-B1, is used when documentation identifies discrete relapses or new MRI activity over time. The non-active modifier, G35.B2, indicates continuous disability that interferes with quality of life, even without the presence of new lesions. This 6th character identifies the patient's current rate of neurological degradation. Many patients eventually transition into secondary progressive MS. The neurological baseline shifts as the periods of stability shorten, and the overall trajectory shows a steady increase in disability. This stage uses the G35.C code family, which also employs the active and non-active modifiers to track the patient's state. Because this state often evolves from the initial diagnosis, a patient may be managed for both relapsing-remitting and secondary progressive characteristics. When this transition occurs, capturing both diagnostic states simultaneously on the claim may be necessary to fully describe the patient's condition. Tracking this shift accurately in the clinical record ensures that the coding reflects the current stage of the disease evolution. While MS is known for neurological symptoms like muscle spasms and cognitive fatigue, its clinical impact often extends much further. As a patient reaches the secondary progressive stage, the disease begins affecting other bodily functions. Bowel and bladder complications often emerge as indicators of this progressive state. Because these new systemic symptoms involve entirely different body systems, they require the targeted expertise of outside specialists, like gastroenterologists. The secondary progressive diagnosis provides the clinical rationale for why a neurology patient requires gastroenterological care. This mapping links the specific diagnosis to systemic symptoms and the resulting referral, establishing the medical necessity for the treatment plan. If these granular codes are absent, claims may be denied and specialized care can be delayed. Precise documentation and coding provide the administrative support needed for holistic patient care. Subscribe for more technical coding updates, and let us know in the comments which ICD-10 or CPT topic you would like us to deconstruct next.